speaker. Allow me to explain you the current situation in the Pacific region and why it is important that we ensure our strengthen our influence in that region. First, the status quo in that region is that China is increasing its power from day to day in an economical way since decades, in a military way only the last few years ago in a significant way. But they are speeding up their pace. They are trying to become a global player, not only in economic aspects, but only in a military aspect. To be realistic, nobody has the chance to prevent this. No other of the world powers today. So we have to decide how to cope with this situation which arises. We think that it is best to lift the embargo of arms on China and to start delivering weapons to them for the following reasons. China currently lacks the know-how to build weapons of that quality for themselves. But they, as I mentioned, have the money and they have started to build up the infrastructure like universities to gain this knowledge. And they also lack the production capacity for building tanks, aircrafts and vast military vessels. Now, if we fill in this gap by delivering those weapons, it does make less financial sense for them to invest their money in gaining this or developing the know-how and building up the production capacity, which in the long term weakens their situation and their possibilities. While on the other hand, our defense industries is strengthened and can build up more production capacity in an economical way, can build up our know-how, and therefore be prepared for the situation of the 21st century. Some people might say it is not wise to provide our powerful weapons to a country like China, which might be true on the first glance, but actually it is quite wise to do so, not only for the reasons I just told you, but there's another reason. We know the weaknesses of our weapon systems best. So if those weapons are used against us, we have the proper countermeasures for the situation too. Another point is about the political relations. My colleague will talk about the situation of the currently global players. We have China, United States, Europe, and last but not least Russia. For now, I just want to emphasize that this delivery, or this lifting of the embargo, would strengthen our relationship to China and will lead to a new relationship and a relationship of trust, maybe, hopefully.
Sure.
1 second. And we think that it is good to acknowledge China not only as a backyard for production of the world, but as a full-featured member who will take its place in the global positioning. Yes, please.
China is infamous for not always respecting copyright. How can you ensure that they did not import the weapons, improve them, and after a few years they've got improved Western weapons?
That's easy to answer. actually we aren't sure that they, but no, we are sure that they won't do because they actually have stolen the production plants, but they aren't able to reproduce the product yet. Intelligence and spying is very common between the global players, and it is very likely, and we are convinced that you can't keep a technology a secret for itself, but it's another thing to have plans to how a technology works and being able to produce it for yourself, and you only need a much more broader understanding of the whole technology, and you need the production capacity as well to do so. So, I think I've presented you the situation we currently have. Where is it going to, and that it's changing in a drastic way in the future, that we have to react upon this change, and it's most wise to react by lifting the arms embargo on China. First, for our economic reasons on our side, the positive aspects for our side, the negative aspects of the Chinese side, they're just paying and not gaining production capacity and the knowledge to produce. And I mentioned the political relationship impact, which my colleague will look at in much further details. And therefore, I beg you to propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those final words, and call upon the first speaker to the opposition.
Okay, dear Chair, today we believe that this idea is bad, and we're going to analyze it from two sides. From the side of international relations, how this would worsen our relationship of Europe with its partners and escalate, just shift the balance of power in the world. And secondly, we are going to speak from the ideological side, why this is not the thing which we want, which the European Union wants to do with their weapon. But before that, let me do 3 points of rebuttal. First of all, on the point that in case China will attack the European Union, we would know weakness of our weapon. I have 2 points to answer to that. First of all, just the idea that China would actually start a full-scale war with Europe is quite unlikely, since we have just probably no superpower would ever attack other superpower because of each of them possess nuclear weapon, and because other countries would not let a full-scale war ever happen. But secondly, because even if such thing happened, we know that on the example of weapons which Russia, for example, sells to China, we know that China or any big country would not let their techniques, their weapon, to stay the same. They would improve them, they would change them to serve their own purpose, because each country has its own military doctrine, and each country has its own knows what it wants from its weapon, and it's not going to stay the same as the way you sell. Because, for example, when Russia sells them tanks T-72, they turn them into other tank called Type 88, which is different from what Russia sells them. Yes.
It might be not likely that China attacks Europe directly, but we are in the NATO, most European countries are, and it's not unlikely that there might be a conflict in the Pacific region with NATO countries, especially the United States. Thank you.
Okay, but then if there is a possible conflict, why would you even sell weapon? If you expect possible conflict, why would you even sell weapon to China? Now, secondly, about the things that if we want to sell them, they will develop their own weapon industry. I don't think that such superpower as China, who wants to be maybe not supreme in the world, but at least supreme in its own region, would not let its own weapon industry would only depend on the weapon which European Union sells to China, because it's hard to imagine that, for example, the USA having its so powerful army would depend on the weapon which, for example, I don't know, Brazil or Mexico sells to the USA. So it's probably that they would buy a weapon from European Union, but also, by the way, develop their own industry, because like all superpowers, all countries that have strong armies like Great Britain, Germany, USA, or Russia, they develop and have their own weapon industry. Now, third, relationship of the trust, improve the relationships with China. The question here is, why do we need, in order to improve our relationship with China, why do we need to sell them our weapon? There are two questions on that. First of all, the question is, why there is no actually a demand from China. Like they do not ask or beg the European Union to help them to improve their weapon industry or something like that. Why can't we, for example, just have a more tight economical connection with China, or why is it not in case for that? And secondly, where I want to come to our case, is that those relationship of trust which you want to build with China are actually going to hurt and also shift our relationship with other countries. First of all, I'm going to say that this is going to worsen, obviously this is going to worsen the relation with countries which consider China as being a big threat for themselves in Pacific region, namely countries like India or Japan, mostly Japan and South Korea. And also, which is even worse in the case of worsening relationship with Japan or South Korea, is because those countries as Japan and South Korea, European Union is partners with them by NATO bloc. So those countries, as Japan, USA, and European Union, they are all our partners by NATO. They plan their operations together, and so the question is whether we should sacrifice our relationship with Japan, who is probably not going to be very happy with the fact that you sell their weapon to their the biggest enemy in this enemy in this region. Secondly, we're probably also going to the way the European Union is probably going to hurt the relation with the USA by that fact, because we know that the USA is quite concerned with the fact that China is rising in this region. In fact, USA helps to Japan in order to somehow suppress China. In order to suppress China or make the threat from China to be less for the USA in this specific region. In this particular case, if the European Union would start selling weapons to the USA, which I think is a more valuable ally for the European Union as historically as de facto, we think this might be like a bad idea. And more than that, we want to touch the point about the shifting balance of power, which could arise from the fact that you sell weapons to some other countries. We know that the weapon trade is a big concern in the world, because that leads to some kind of say arm race, something like that. And we know that now, for example, what I mean is that, for example, today Russia is trying to be friends with China. They're trying to cooperate together. And so when they will see that, for example, European Union is trying to improve their relationship with China, especially by selling them weapons, Russia would try to keep their friends closer to them. And for example, they can start selling even more weapons to China. Those would shift this balance of power, and this shift would lead to some unexpected changes, and probably to the escalation and more hot relationships with Russia. And I'm not talking about the fact that, okay, maybe the relationship between European Union and China already not really good, but this could actually mean that more hostile relationships, in the fact that a relation may become more hostile. And so on the last point, I want to say that ideologically, European Union was always kind of opposing themselves to China, which they were often criticizing for the fact that they do not value liberty of their own citizens and or their citizens, and the fact that for the European Union sells a weapon to those say unfriendly regime or something like that may actually hurt the reputation of the European Union as in eyes of the whole world, as well as in eyes of the citizens of the European Union, who may consider this as a logical fact. My partner will elaborate more on that. Thanks.
Kind of see speaker very much for those fine words and call upon the next speaker for the conference.
China is going to be the superpower in many years, and we cannot stop this. So we have to decide that we are standing on China's side and not against them. And this is why we should impose this version. So in my speech, I'm first going to talk about the effects this will actually have on the EU and elaborate on the points of my partner. And then I will be secondly talking about how we are preventing Russia and other parties to actually have bigger ties with China. But before I'm doing this, I will give you 2 points of rebuttaling to what we have just heard of said opposition. So first, they were talking about that we are worsening the ties with Japan and South Korea, and that we are sacrificing them. Of course, this might be a risk, but we do not say that we are like suddenly stopping cooperating with Japan and South Korea. They will still get our support in this, and this is actually this situation is why we need to have ties with China, because if we're improving our situation with China, we are and China getting dependent on us through these weapons, we are actually having a better stand on saying, well, if you are attacking Japan more, we will stop this. So we kind of get more control of them with having a tie and with having them being more dependent in terms of these, which secondly brings me onto the point they have been talking about Russia, of how Russia will start continuing growing their bound with China, but we actually disagree with this, because China at the moment is turning to Russia or other parties, because the EU puts on so many embargoes and stops to China. So therefore, actually, Russia is growing, and with making these ties to China, we will actually stopping this escalation, or at least making it less, and therefore we will actually improve this. But this will be talked about more in my second point. So now getting on to the effects on the EU actually has. So Joe has also already talked a little bit about how it actually improves the industry in the EU, the weapon industry, but also other situations. So at the moment, the status quo is that they currently have quite a bad industry, but they have the knowledge and they have the capacities. So this would be actually improving. And the problem we see at the moment is that some countries, especially Germany, now do not reach the limits of weapons they actually need. By now increasing their production, they would also increase this production in order to reach the level they have to reach. And therefore then they're actually strengthening their own army in this same, because at the moment, as the EU is at peace, they don't really have an incentive in order to strengthen their weapons, although they are obliged to do this by regulation, which is happening now. And secondly, my main point is that they're making ties with China for this. As I've already mentioned, is that these weapons are very important and that they are needed in China, because as Joe has said in the status quo is that currently China doesn't have the know-how, but China needs these weapons, and therefore they are actually coming to Europe. And there was a need of the reason why they put on this embargo, because China wanted this weapon. With now, so it actually is proven that they would come to us. Therefore, so with lifting this embargo, we can make them more dependent on us, and we can actually strengthen our economic relationships with them. With them, because now we have more trade, and especially in something they need. So they will not just start attacking our partners or the EU themselves, because China needs what the EU can offer. But why do we actually want China to be one of the partners of the EU? Because China is going to be the superpower, as my teammate and me have said, and they are going to grow, and it is better to have this superpower, which soon can has more power than the US, and therefore we need their support. And having China as an affiliate makes the EU themselves stronger, because at the moment we see the problem that the EU kind of is crumbling and the strength of the EU is reducing. But having such a strong affiliate in this, as China makes the EU themselves stronger. So what I've given you on the effect on the EU is, first, it improves the industry, it secondly improves the ties with China, and thirdly, it makes the EU stronger with having such a big partner as China. So now I want to get onto my second point. Prevent Russia and other players to be China's partner. So as we always say, is China can't be stopped. So China always turns to somebody because they need support. As we have said, they don't have the capacity at the moment or the knowledge in order to actually produce the weapon there was. So they are going to find a partner, because even China cannot stay on their own. So the other options we could see, and we are seeing at the moment, is that China is going to turn to Russia. Well, as I've already shown you of how China would make the EU themselves stronger, it would happen the same to Russia. Having Russia and China combined so strongly is bad, and we don't want this, because China and Russia themselves are having issues with human rights and in their politics. And to have them combined, nothing is going to change. But again, if you are partners closely economic, you can also make a change. No, thank you. In terms of politics. So the EU actually has then a stance of saying, well, we will import more with you if you are making a step forward in human rights, and so therefore we will actually have more power over them themselves. But why having Russia again is so bad? Because because they are already imposing a lot of threat in the EU with themselves. So with making Russia grow, we will put a more direct harm on the EU, because China at the moment, this area is quite far away, but Russia is our next door neighbor, and therefore it will have problems of this. And by preventing China to cooperate more with Russia, means that the power growth of Russia, which they gain through the affiliation with China, will be stopped, and therefore this threat can be prevented in a better way. So what I have brought you were the effects on the EU, and secondly, how it prevents Russia from this, and in this case, how the EU actually helps himself by not having another huge player, which in this case would be Russia. And this is why I beg you to propose.
Thank the speaker very much for those words, and call upon the next speaker for the opposition.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to start from the little rebuttal, and then I will proceed to develop an own case. So first of all, what do we hear? As the side of opposition, we wanted to be provided with the analysis as to why, as to what prospective benefits of lifting such embargo would be that outweigh costs of doing so. Unfortunately, the proposition side doesn't say anything except for saying that China requires and needs those kind of weapons. Well, any part of the world, especially those who are currently in war or kind of battle, need weapons, but it doesn't mean that the EU should actually provide them with it. Then, they're saying that we will improve our own technology and meet some sort of quota and improve our own industry that today is not developing. What we claim that it can be done without selling weapons to China, especially opening yourself to such a great market that China is today. So I'm going to develop this thought in my own argument later. Then, they're saying that today we need to take sides. We need to pick a side, and it better be China, because it's one of the biggest superpowers, and it's going to lead the world in the future. But today, as my colleague is showing you today, this sort of affiliation and taking sides, especially in this way, in this military kind of way, as to providing weapons to this kind of superpower, will end up in us losing our position in the world. Worsening our relationships with other partners that today we heavily rely on, such as the United States, Japan, South Korea, and so on and so forth. I'm going to evaluate on this later again. Then, our proposition side has a rather positive outlook, if not unrealistic, as to expecting China to be heavily dependent on EU if they're expecting China to be a superpower in the future. How a superpower will be dependent on such a crumbling union that EU is in the eyes of the proposition itself, we don't know how it's happening. Today we're saying that rather than being dependent on the EU, China will take advantage of this kind of policy of lifting the embargo, and they will lift EU without any support, with all these worsened relationships with other countries, and EU will actually worsen its position on the international arena. Yes?
Currently, the United States are dependent on Russia to lift any cargo to the orbit because they have neglected their capacity in space-manned craft ship.
Thank you very much for your point. I'm going to proceed to my own argument. So, today we're also talking about ideological perspective and how it's even not only that it's dangerous for you to lift this embargo, but also ideologically should not be done from the ideological perspective. First of all, EU is known to be the country that always roots for diplomacy rather than warfare and battles. And this is what is our main strategy, is peaceful resolution of conflicts. So today, by actually opening ourselves to this great market as China is, and selling them weapons, again, as I'm saying, that is tightly related to some sort of warfare or some sort of abuse of human rights, especially in China. This is what I want to stress in my own case today. So China is known for some sort of violence, human rights abuses inside their country. I'm going to give you an example of Tiananmen Square. When students went out rioting, and what did the government of Chinese government do? They reportedly killed those people. So today we know that the government uses those weapons against its own citizens, and this is something that we as the EU cannot actually support and protect. In a minute. Then, we also know that China has inside wars, and maybe some people even call it genocide, against Uyghurs on the territory of their country. So they're actually this tribe that wants an autonomy in China today is struggling because the Chinese government aims to eliminate them. So again, these examples of human rights abuses that are happening inside the country will be exacerbated and will be supported by us selling the weapons and by us developing their weaponry industry. Then, what else do I want to talk about? I want to talk about how a lot of things strengthen our relationship with China. And if this is the main problem the proposition side emphasizes, that we need to strengthen our relationships, we claim that it can be done in other ways without selling weaponry to China. How? Today, a lot of sanctions are put on Russia, right? A lot of products are not sold and are bought from Russia. So today, by negotiating and opening up trade with China may strengthen the relationships. And again, let me give you an example that a lot of things can strengthen relationships between countries, as, for example, say, neglecting or closing our eyes on human rights abuses. They will strengthen our relationship with the country, but doesn't mean that we are supposed to do so? No. So unfortunately, proposition side fails to provide them with the reasons why strengthening such relationships is actually justified. In a minute. Now they're saying that it's easier for us to cooperate with a partner that doesn't, that it's easier for us to cooperate with China because in the future they will protect us against some sort of threats. And it's easier for us being friends with them as opposed to being attacked by them. But this is what we're saying. China today as a superpower will not only be averted from a partner who dictates and puts some kind of conditions on the trade, but also other people will be, and other countries will be averted from the European Union, especially countries that are supporting human rights and stuff like that, because the European Union, who was once and who played once the role of the main actor who always seeks for diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolutions, now becoming the major weapon seller in China, if this is what they're claiming. They're saying China is going to be dependent on us, which equals to us being the main seller of weaponry to this region. Which means that EU now becoming not the actor that always protects and supports diplomacy and peaceful resolutions and protects people and doesn't want people to die. Now now EU becoming the main exporter of the weaponry in the world because they're accessing this sort of market. So all in all, by comparing the costs and benefits that we're prospectively getting from lifting the embargo, we can clearly see that we do not have enough reasons for lifting the embargo, and not only that we don't have enough reasons for lifting it, we also will face a lot of costs and a lot of negative consequences, which means that this policy should not be implemented. Thank you very much.
Final words, call to the next speaker for proposition.
Okay, thank you everybody. I'm going to continue this debate on the side of the government. Before I start with our arguments, I'd just like to offer a few points of rebuttal. First, what they say is just because China needs weapons doesn't mean we should sell those. Well, it's a market that we are losing, and it's a huge market. What we believe on the side of the government, if there is a chance to open up to such a market, then we should do it because it helps us economically. That's that. Also, they said that we can also develop arms without even trading to China, but if this is like an easier way to develop our economy and our army, then we should probably use it. And also what they said, one of their main points is that if we take sides, we will end up losing our allies in the world like Japan or US. What we believe, dear Chair, is that this is highly unlikely because we already have such close economical ties to Japan and US. It is highly, yes, it will cause some kind of disturbance, but not that much that will ruin or will be detrimental to our economies. What we believe here is that the world is divided in blocks, and if we want for the EU bloc to be most successful, we believe that we should strengthen relationships with all blocs. And what we are losing here in this particular situation, we are losing our connection to the Eastern Bloc. We are losing, first of all, somebody we could trade with, somebody we could have better diplomatic relations with, and also we are losing, as the first government already mentioned, we are losing a powerful ally against EU's greatest, let's say, economical and political enemy, which is Russia. Because strengthening our relationship with China, would deter China to go look towards Russia for help. And thus make us gain more leverage on Russia. And the second point they say is that we don't ideologically side with China, so that's why we shouldn't offer our lift our embargo. But first of all, because of human rights breaches. 2 points on that. First of all, EU already doesn't quite care about human rights breaches when it comes if it has its economical interests at best, because we are already trading with Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. Secondly, and this is more importantly, by selling our arms to China, we are actually gaining leverage from two perspectives. First of all, we are gaining more diplomatic connections because China has been systematically been dismissive to EU diplomatic pursuits, to EU trying to protect human rights in that area, because it sees this embargo as outdated, as insulting. It has systematically been declining EU's diplomatic advances. So if we lift this embargo, what we claim in our first argument, which is improving relations, that Beijing, who considers this embargo insulting and outdated, will, and if we lift it, it will make China less dismissive to our diplomatic pursuit, which will help more development to the human rights. And secondly, on the point of that leverage, if we sell them weapons, and EU sees that those weapons are being used to breach human rights, to brutally murder or kill, EU can just as likely say, okay, while we're seeing that you're using our weapons for that, we are cutting our trade with you, when it comes to those weapons. So it will actually help protect better human rights because we are gaining leverage. By entering their market, we are gaining control. What we believe here is that this is a very important thing for EU to do because it gives us a diplomatic leverage. Thank you. Because this is literally our main dispute. Because China, as I already explained, did not cooperate diplomatically just because of this dispute, and they systematically told that as an argument, we will not cooperate because you will not lift that embargo, especially when it comes to like ecology and emissions. Maybe if we lift that embargo, what we believe is that we could gain more leverage and more influence in that area, and kind of drastically improve not only our relations within ourselves, but also the situation in China when it comes to like emissions, ecology, human rights. And this is why we believe that opening to China is definitely a priority for the EU. Secondly, what I would like to talk about, is that why this is very important for EU in an economical sense. Because EU is currently suffering a really harsh crisis. Austerity, it's suffering economical breakdowns happening all over the EU. And we should look up to US when it comes to trading arms, because one of the main parts of the US's economy and why is it so stable and why do they have so many money, is because they're such big arms dealer. What we believe that EU should do here is just follow the same example. If we have our economy in shambles and we would like to improve that, this is one of the easiest ways. It will be beneficial for the EU. It will also make more cooperation with China, more investment, and make EU's economy more stable, more harder, and at the end of the day, more richer. And thirdly, what I wanted to say, it will lead to better correlations inside of the EU too. Why? Because this has been a dispute that's been going on for like 20 years, and if we just cut it down and solve it right now, that dispute is off the table, and we can go back to like countries inside of the EU functioning normally together and just not talk about it ever more. And yeah, for all of these reasons, we beg you to propose. Thank you very much.
Thank the speaker very much for those kind words, and call on the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you for the floor, Ms. Speaker. So, we do acknowledge the fact that China is an upcoming world power, and especially therefore we think we should be really critical in what way we want to cooperate with them. Because, let's be honest, China is not as us. They don't share the same Western values we have. And it doesn't have to be a problem per se, but it does imply that there are differences, for example, on political views on how to treat your people in general. So basically what I'm going to bring you is how cooperation with countries that are not like us, so not typical Western democratic countries, how the diplomacy should work. I will start with a lot of rebuttal of what has been said so far. So actually the idea we get from opening government is that their main reason to do this is that they want to make China dependent of us. Actually what they try to bring you, well, especially because they now lack because they now lack the military technology, we do have the technology, we supply this to them, and for some reason we can influence their policies. Well, actually, we believe that especially when we deliver our military technology, we sell it, they don't borrow it, they will own it, they will have it, that it will come exactly at the same military level as we have. And we think for that reason, we do lose a deterrence factor, because America and the European Union can influence the world also because they have this military technology. Secondly, we also think that if they know exactly what our military technology is, besides of owning it, buying it, they will really investigate it critically. So actually we believe that you're giving them free intelligence, so they don't even have to spy on us anymore, because they will see exactly how those weapons are made. And of course this doesn't, they won't know like directly how we produce it, but when you have the weapon and you can just slightly research it, and they have really smart researchers over there as well, we really help them improving their own weapon industry, and they do already have factories, they do have enough manpower, they only lack the technology, and we believe that, yeah, we almost freely give them this advantage to improve their weapon industry, and therefore they will become less dependent of us, because we can't say, well, we have this technology, listen to us, because otherwise we won't give it to you. No, but you already gave it to them. Let's see. Yeah, and actually also closing government was saying, yeah, but we can make some money of it, of selling with weapons. Well, okay, maybe on the short run, indeed we can make some money, but we still believe that at some point they will have the technology. But besides, we don't think that making money itself is a good argument, because I can sell the most immoral things to people and making money with that, but that doesn't make the world a better place. Let's see. So yeah, what we also see, they were also talking about is Russia-Chinese relationships. Well, actually we don't believe if we don't sell weapons to China that China is going to Russia, because the Russian weapon industry is less advanced than the Chinese one, so they don't have that much to look for over there. And even if Chinese-Russian relationships would improve because of this weapon trade, then we don't see the direct problem, because we don't see the threat of Russia and China if they're cooperating. Why that's per se bad for the European Union, because actually if this means that they get more intertwined with them together, and we have already economic relationships with China, we don't see any threats for the European Union. So to quickly go to our own stuff. So actually we believe that cooperation with countries that are not like you do have different levels. So if you trade with a country who does have most of the same values like you don't have to be that critical. So for example, America and the European Union, they do share a lot of values on democracy, on the free market, on how to treat your own people. So actually we believe that therefore you can have full cooperation. But actually, if we look at China, we see that they are a one-party state. We see that especially in Tibet, they have been violating the human rights there for decades, and they actually we disapprove that. We believe that they are occupying this country. And this doesn't mean that there won't be any cooperation at all, because we believe that we still can have cultural cooperation. So we believe we can still have exchanges, for example, with students. We can learn from each other, of each other's culture. We give each other its values. So we believe that dialogue is good. We also believe, to some extent, that economic cooperation can be good, because we've seen that countries that are really intertwined are much less likely to attack each other or to do nasty things to each other. But military cooperation can only happen if you have full trust, if you totally know, if you totally accept their values. Because if you cooperate military, this does imply that you do approve the things they're going to use that military for. And we don't approve the fact that they are oppressing their own people in Tibet, that they are doing things in the Pacific Sea. So we only believe that military cooperation is legitimate if we share the same goals. Because if you deliver weapons to a different country, you actually cannot say that you disapprove their foreign policies, because you're actually part of it, you're helping it. So it's really a hypocrite to say, okay, and this is also what closing was bringing, so if you're violating these human rights, we can just say, well, we're not delivering anymore. Well, let's be honest, you already knew that they were doing this, so it's really hypocrite, and you lose a lot of moral authority when you then say you stop exporting these weapons, and actually you've also been guilty because you've done that. So actually, what we believe is that one of the big powers of the European Union is, besides being technology very advanced, having a very economic, a good economy, this gives us the opportunity to also export on moral authority or expert on moral values. And we believe that one of the powers of the European Union is that we set very high standards to new countries joining the European Union. And actually, when we're selling weapons to countries which are violating human rights on a constant basis, which we believe is happening in Tibet and also other separate regions, Xinjiang, there in the north, we also think we have lower legitimacy to say to new member states that they should approve human rights, because actually we're supporting regimes that don't do that. So for all these reasons, please oppose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for those final words and call upon the next speaker.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm really glad to finish this debate from the side of the government, and I will start with pointing a few clashes which happened during the debate, and through them I will give our rebuttal. First of the clashes which happened in the debate was about international relations and how would it benefit or how would it worsen the situation for European Union, and what are the costs of it. From the side of the opposition, we heard that it would be really bad for European Union. How would it reflect on their relations with other countries in Pacific area, with their member states? How would it all influence politics of European Union? And to be honest, we didn't hear really a stable argument from the side of the opposition, which would go against everything we heard from the government. What we're saying here that what government was saying that by opening to China, by lifting arms embargo towards China, we would we would show that European Union is finally ready to continue with relations with China, to open to them and show them trust. And from my partner, you heard lots of reasons why it is important and good for European Union. Amongst others, it's resolving this problem European Union had amongst its member states, and showing readiness to open economy to the China and start having good relations. And how will it benefit the European Union? In a way to have a good, strong ally who is really likely to be strong in the future in the East. And to start making relations, good relations for that future, because we believe it would stable situation in the world and in the Europe in future if there if there comes to a bigger conflict, and it is good for European Union to start making good relations now when it's still stable situations. There is no greater threat in the future or something, and why not start now?
Question?
No, thank you. The other clash which happened was to talk about ideology. Is it acceptable for Western countries, European Union member states are, to start relations with someone who has history of violation of human rights and basically not so popular history as China does? What we heard from the opposition is that China is really bad for violating human rights, and that it is really bad. And yes, we agree. Human rights violation is really bad and dirty, and we shouldn't do that. But I don't think that it really matters in serious politics, because no state ever really cared when they had big interest in something. Does that state violates human rights or not? I mean, bad things happen throughout of the Eastern Western world, and still like European Union and USA and all Western states still have like good relations with them because it benefits them economically and politically both. So that's why we think that in this matter it doesn't really matter what happens inside of China. And what my partner what my partner already told you, that if we build good connections with China, once when we are really strong partners, we will be able to tell them, okay, I will not help you anymore in this matter if you don't do this, don't stop doing this. And we think that it's like it gives us better opportunity to have some sanctions in China, to go inside of them and become their partner and regulate them more.
China currently is not offering any kind of negotiations regarding human rights or something like that, and keeps growing without EU helping them out. What makes you think that China will get dependent on EU to the point that they will?
What makes me think that is that nobody ever actually gave China the opportunity, because they have like really in the last 100 years they have like really bad history, really wrong things happening there. They had like really bad politicians coming to power and leading them to that situations. And we believe that when Western world gives them opportunity, we are giving you a hand, we are willing to help, but you have to play by our rules. We think that they will be more ready to cooperate. So I will talk about third clash that happened, and which we didn't hear really much response from the opposition, and that's an economical benefit of going in these deeper connections with China. And that's opening of the market in the China. And once you get in the market in China, it's not no, thank you, I don't have that really. You're going to be inside, and maybe in a close future it won't be anymore only arms. You will be able to go more inside the Chinese economy, to put your products in there and make them more open to the Western world. And given all that I already said before, I think that all that together would be really benefit for both European Union, China, and third party, and that's world society, which would all benefit from one strong Western countries, a group of countries, making really strong connections with one Eastern country who has really bad history, but we will give them opportunity to leave that behind and to continue with the bright future. So for all these reasons, we beg you to propose.
Next speaker for those final words, and call upon the last speaker, please.
Thank you for the floor, Madam Speaker. In my speech I will first go into a quick rebuttal, and then I will explain the extension my partner gave you further on. At the proposition side we mostly heard that they find economic benefits very important, and they think that this, their case, will gain us a diplomatic leverage to China so we can attack environmental issues and grow our economy. Well, first, we think that it's not a good thing that China only wants to cooperate and talk about these issues if we deliver weapons to them. And secondly, we see that about our economy, we see that in the last decades we improved our economic relations with China a lot, and it's still growing, and we think that it can still happen without selling weapons to China. And secondly, the question is, what is more important? It's more important to protect the minorities in China, to stay on the side with countries who share our values like Japan and the US, and who are strong allies and with important values, or is it more important to go to China's side, to throw away our values because we want to grow our economy and have some sort of diplomatic leverage where we don't even know, heard from the proposition what that exactly means and how that exactly would work. It's the economy versus the Western values on this side. And we will explain in our opposition case why it is, in my speech I will explain why this is so important, and the rest of the rebuttal will be implemented in my speech. No, thank you. So, we believe that we should only buy and sell weapons with countries who share the most important values, and so we should not support countries who suppress minorities, and I will explain why this is so important. So, countries who share our important values, like for example peace. We want to, in Europe, we want to give every person in this world the opportunity to live in peace, and then therefore have more opportunities to live a good life. Secondly, we want to give every person the freedom of speech. We want to protect minorities and give people power to stand up for themselves. For example, this is not happening with Christians in China. They can't even express their beliefs because it's not possible, and they are suppressed in China. And thirdly, democracy is a very important value of the Western world and in Europe. We see that the policies, we think it's very important that policies of countries should benefit citizens, who should be based on the opinion of citizens and healthy citizens. And we see that this is not happening in China, and that they still don't have a democracy there. China doesn't fully share these values. We don't know what their interests exactly are, besides that they're gaining more and more, they want to gain more and more power, and furthermore we see that they are using their power to harm minorities as Christians, but also like departments like Tibet and Xinjiang. Yeah.
How can we influence China anymore if we don't sustain our army, weapon industry, and are forced to import our weapons from China in the foreseeable future? We can have, like, together with the US and with the European Union and other allies like Japan, we think that's a very strong way to force them to change these policies, and we think that there's a way bigger harm to sell weapons to them, and we don't see how this exactly will help us with changing that behavior. I think we all only enforce their behavior and their power with this. Because what is the function of weapons in this world? The first one is the perception of having power. For example, we don't fully fight against Russia because we see that we are scared of their military power. And in the proposition case, we enforce the military power of China. Well, it's not in our interests to do so, and it's even harmful because, secondly, when we enforce their military power, we give them the ability to use weapons against other parties. And firstly, we don't know what their future interests are, because there's no democracy there, and any leader with bad intentions can have the power there. And more importantly, at the moment we already see that China is suppressing minorities like Christians, especially departments like Tibet and Xinjiang, and we don't want to enforce them in their military power to do so. The European Union doesn't have any interest in selling weapons to China, and the European Union especially don't want to support China in any way with suppressing minorities and departments as Tibet. We should force them to change this behavior, and we should not enforce them to continue with this behavior. European Union also doesn't have any interest in buying weapons from China, because we can produce them ourselves or buy them, for example, from the US. And lastly, the European Union can improve their bonds with China in other ways. We can firstly strive for peace and then don't want weapons to play a big role in the future. And secondly, we can improve our bonds with China by improving our economic relationships in other way, and we still show that we are on their side in economic about the economic issues, and show that weapons shouldn't play a big role in the future, because we want peace in the world, and we don't want weapons to play a big play an important role in the future. Yeah.
So do you actually think that China is going to cooperate more with the EU if this highly hated embargo is still on?
Yeah, sure, because the first need they have is just gain more money, growing their economy, because we see that their economy is not growing as much as in the last 10 years, and they want to improve that. That is their first priority, and therefore, yeah, they will still continue with this economic relationships, and we can still improve that, as we have seen in the last decades. So in the proposition world, they want weapons, want war, and want other harms will come with that. to play a bigger role in the future. They support China in suppressing minorities, and they have a big risk of China becoming too powerful. In the opposition world, we will make clear that China should not suppress minorities, that we want peace in that world and focus on healthy, sustainable and peaceful relationships, and that we should principally only sell weapons to countries who share our values, and if they don't, then we should force them to share our values, because we showed that those values are very important to have a peaceful and a good world for everyone. And therefore we are proud to oppose. Thank you.